This is my assignment number 2 or project number 2 presentation. The first concept I will be talking about is the concept of functionalism. According to the textbook, functionalism can also be called structural functional theory, which was developed by Herbert Spencer, who saw similarities between the functions of society and the human body, or organs in the human body. If one of these social institutions were to dissolve or go away, then you would see a ripple effect among the society that would have a negative effect on it. These social institutions could include healthcare system, the police department, the fire department, like I have pictured above. And just like these organs in the human body, if they were to fail, they would possibly kill the human body or at least severely hamper it for the time being, unless it's operated on and fixed. So, in a healthy society, according to the textbook, all parts work together to maintain stability in a state called dynamic equilibrium. The second concept in this presentation will be that of field research. Now, that refers to gathering primary data from an environment without doing experiments or surveys. Now, to conduct this field research, a sociologist must be willing to step into new environments that may be threatening toward them in order to get the information that they need. Especially nowadays, field research could include going to very public spaces to get the opinions of people on the COVID crisis going on right now. Field research very much depends, or not depends, but relies on the setting to observe the behaviors of the people or the subjects of the environment that they are studying. And overall, field research isn't about finding the cause and effect of different things in society, but rather correlations. The third concept on this presentation will be that of subculture. A subculture is a culture that exists within a larger one. The United States is made up of many, many different types of cultures existing on different planes like ethnic or racial backgrounds or shared experiences and activities that they like to do together. This can be seen in various restaurants that are dotted around the US, like Chinese restaurants or Jamaican restaurants. And with the shared experiences or activities, this can be seen at airsoft fields, paintball fields, football fields, even in schools, with all the different sports that they all have their own culture and what binds them together and makes them work together better as a team. Typically, subcultures are welcoming to new people, or they're willing to have people. Typically, they are willing to have people observe them and even dwell in their culture to see what's going on. The next concept is that of rationalization, and according to the textbook, a rational society is one built around logic and efficiency rather than morality or tradition. Typically, when capitalism is brought up, it is referred to as a rationalist way of going about using the economy, and if taken to the extreme, then it can result in negative effects of people having the repetitive routine, doing the same thing over and over, and their lives being boring. But with the right balance, like the picture I have displayed, if you have a life away from that hustle and bustle of the capitalist system, then you can live comfortably away from all of the noise of the city and live in peace. Even then, capitalism typically doesn't result in only heavy machine-like labor. It produces jobs that are pretty cushy, so you don't have to work your tail off every time you leave your house to go to work. The next topic is the concept of moral development, which is an important process in the socialization of young people. It refers to what society deems as good or bad and how they teach them that. For a society to run smoothly, it is paramount that people know what is right and what is wrong. This starts at this starts off at a young age when young boys and young girls are taught through toys even and in school how to act and how to behave with other students in their classroom. Now, moral development has three levels: pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. The picture above indicates the pre-conventional stage where young children who lack a higher level of cognitive ability experience the world around them only through their senses. With the baby dolls, they experience touch and um, sight when they see these cute little baby dolls and they want to care for them. They're basically taught through these toys that they are caregivers and that they need to aspire to be caregivers to young children. The next topic is the concept of group leadership. In large groups, people tend to stray away from the goal of said group, and they often need to be reminded of the goal so that they can strive toward it. You see this in football teams, on soccer teams, and basically sports teams in general, where you have a bunch of people who are jacked up and ready to go. If they get too far into their own heads about their own goals, then they tend to mess up and um, it doesn't benefit the team at all. So they need a group leader who will rally them and to make sure that they can get the win in any type of game or match that they're in. You don't see that relationship in only sports, though. You see it in the military. You see it in even work groups in schools. You need a leader like a principal, a leader like a lieutenant to get the goal done or accomplished. The concept of social disorganization concludes that crime is more likely to occur in a place where there is high poverty and crime. A person who grows up in these conditions is more likely to become a criminal themselves and repeat the process again, whereas a person from a richer neighborhood is more likely to be successful. So this relates to the commonly held view that it is the environment that creates the person, not the person themselves who comes out the womb and is new to the world. They are a product of their environment. The concept of symbolic interactionism has to do with the way people treat other people who possess different types of electronics or technology. This can range anywhere from the type of phone that you use on a day-to-day basis to the kind of car that you drive. I remember a few years ago when the Apple AirPods came out, and there were a ton of social media posts calling people who didn't own the AirPods broke. So uh, there's definitely a wealth factor that goes into um, how people see others who have expensive technology or the newest technology. So, out of that kind of behavior, you see the rise of neo-Luddites and technophiles. Neo-Luddites are people who see newer technology as a symbol of coldness to the world, whereas technophiles, they see technology as a symbol of a brighter future. According to the textbook, class traits are also called class markers, and they're the typical behaviors, customs, and norms that define each class. For an example of the behavioral differences between lower and higher class people, lower class people tend to be louder and more rambunctious, whereas higher class people tend to be more quiet and um, subtle with their actions. Another trait with higher class people is that they tend to drive around more expensive and luxury cars, whereas lower class and middle class people uh, drive more service oriented cars. So they won't be looking for luxury, rather they'll be looking for the utility out of their cars instead of shopping for comfort and the expensive labels that cars come with. In the past few years, however, this line has been blurred. A lot of times on social media, you'll see people who wear expensive clothing, but they won't own a car or they won't have any kind of like stake in the stock market or any real investments that will help propel their wealth. It's more like showing off that you have the money to buy these clothes, but usually nothing else. The concept of relative poverty is a state in which people can afford the necessities, but they can't reach or surpass society's standard of living. This is especially apparent in the US, where the average person who's impoverished can have a refrigerator, air conditioning, even access to the internet. And as electronics become cheaper over time in the United States, they can buy them too, and that's why I have the tablet in my hand in the photo up above. It's a cheap little thing that you can buy for what, $60. And although it's not the most high-end device, it's something that you can use to entertain yourself on. The concept of a culture of prejudice is a reference to the theory that prejudice is embedded in our culture. Nowadays, that can be seen when a white police officer pulls over a black person, and the black person assumes that the white police officer is pulling them over because they are black, when in fact it is usually not the case. It's usually the cops saw them take a wrong turn or they have a broken tail light. So it kind of results in a tailspin of events that result in a person getting arrested or a cop getting fired for little to no reason. This tends to happen when on social media, videos of officers seemingly committing grievous offenses against other people arise, and they get very popular, and people assume that every cop is like that. So you have people saying all cops are bad, or uh, you have cops saying all these types of people are bad because they are assuming that we are doing things that we were not doing. So it only leads to bad things. Sexism is the belief that one sex is better than the other based off of prejudices. Kind of like racism, it can be either very subtle or it can progress to being very apparent. One example of that would be that um, women do X, so men are better than women at all things. Or a man did this to me, therefore all men are bad. So it it can get very hairy when it gets extreme, especially on platforms like Twitter or Instagram, where that those kinds of messages are promoted almost by the algorithm because hate drives shares, and shares get more revenue for the website. Theory suggests that as a person gets older, they withdraw further from society and social relationships. There are several main points to the theory. The first being that as we physically grow older and start to lose some of our mental capacity, we naturally withdraw from people. The second is that um, they grow freer as they aren't expected to keep up with social norms. And the third is that um, disengagement is gendered. So men tend to focus on work, and women tend to focus on marriage and family. So if a man gets really old and he doesn't have anything to occupy his time after he retires, then he tends to die quickly. If a woman doesn't have a family, she will get likely very lonely or put in a home, and she will die early too. The concept of marriage varies slightly around the world, but the basic understanding is that two people are coming together to be legally recognized as a union based on commitment and a sexual relationship. Typically, people get married to have a family and to have a person that will support them for the rest of their lives. But sometimes people are forced into a marriage because they had a kid beforehand or other uh, ambiguous reasons. Religious organizations vary widely across the world and typically have a large impact on the society's structure. Take the United States, for example, who based its laws off of Judeo Christian principles. Then they can be divided up into a few different sections. So you have cults, um, which are typically new religious movements, but they are very authoritarian, kind of, where you have one charismatic leader who is in control of the other people's lives. And it's kind of funny, but typically it's the guy who wants to have sex with everybody's wife and finds an excuse for that through their god. Then there is a sect, which is a relatively small and new group. Most of the well-known denominations in the United States began as a sect, and they have grown to become official denominations, recognized parts of Christianity. Social placement refers to the use of education as a means to achieve upward social mobility. Within the past decades, people in America have been told to go to college to get a higher paying job because that is what we have seen over the past few decades in the United States. More people go to college, they tend to make more money, but can become a problem as more and more people go to college. The jobs that they go there for they get overinflated, and then the wages start to drop, and then you have people who are in debt and end up not being able to pay it off because they went into a highly saturated field. A representative democracy is a system in which people elect representatives that will vote on their behalf. In a democracy, or a direct democracy, each person has one equal vote, which favors the majority, but in a republic, the minority has more say in what policies need to get passed. Money is a medium of exchange that we use to trade goods on the market without having to barter actual good for good. The value of money is based off of what the government has to back it up. We used to be on the United States used to be on the gold standard, but then we moved it to a fiat currency where it is only worth as much as the United States government says it's worth. The best part about using money to exchange goods instead of good for good is that we don't have to trade something like 5,000 eggs for an iPhone. Mental health is an unseen problem in adults and young people that hasn't really been brought to light until the last decade. In the textbook, you'll find that according to the National Institute of Mental Health, the most common mental disorders in the United States are anxiety orders, which affects about 18% of U.S. adults in a single year, and 28% are likely to be affected over the course of a lifetime. The second most common mental disorder are mood disorders, which 10% of the US adults are likely to be affected by yearly, and 21% are likely to be affected over the course of a lifetime. Going back to anxiety disorders, they include obsessive compulsive disorder, panic disorders, post traumatic stress disorder, and both social and specific phobias. Then major mood disorders include depression, bipolar disorder, and dysthymic disorder. Many people will be impacted by minor times of anxiety or depression, but it becomes a problem when they last for months at a time and start to have an effect on your life. Urbanization is the study of the political, economic, and social relationships in cities. They study how a city becomes a city and and actually how the behavior of the people in the city um, changes as it shifts from a rural to an urban environment. Cities become larger and larger when there is a good environment with fresh water and a favorable climate, then advanced technology and a stable and strong social and um, economy. Urbanization in the United States rapidly increased during and after the Industrial Revolution. Social movements are organized groups that work toward achieving change in the social environment. People tend to forget the importance of social movements as that is how the United States was created and that is how civil rights were achieved in the 60s. Social movements can happen on a local, state, and national scale, even worldwide sometimes, with the right conditions. In the picture displayed, it was a Black Lives Matter protest to relocate the statue that was placed in front of the DMV. They were able to talk to the right people, and it got on the ballot for this year's election.